Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Future Hacker, and I'm your host, Maria Taiji. You know how we always end up discussing the lack of workforce qualification for companies that are trying to disrupt the market, right? So today, we're talking to someone that is addressing this very issue for the artificial intelligence field. Joseph Wehbe is a co-founder and CEO of DAIMLAS, which stands for Deliver Artificial Intelligence Machine Learning at Scale, a B2B artificial intelligence marketplace startup that won the first place of MIT's Hackathon in the knowledge economy and awarded top 20 most promising young startup by MIT MENA. Joseph is also an ambassador for Stanford's Women in Data Science in Canada. Hi, Joseph. It's so great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Maria. I'm great and a really big fan of your work and your podcast. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So Joseph, just, tell us the story behind the startup you have. So the problem you are aiming to solve is pretty clear to us, and we actually love just talking about that. But how are you planning to actually make it happen?
Yeah, that's a really great question to start off with. So in the summer of 2019, I moved to Canada to pursue my artificial intelligence master's program at Queen's University. And that was the university where Elon Musk had spent 2 years before he moved on to the US. So I said, if it was good enough for Elon Musk, it's good enough for me. So starting my AI journey in Canada was a really amazing place because Canada has this national AI strategy. So you have this density of AI talent, you have the AI research institutions, and then you have really an entire ecosystem that's trying to develop into a leading global hub, and it's getting there. So just being part of the program, I was actually the class president. So in that role, I had to interact with a lot of stakeholders. And during that time, I started to realize there's a massive problem in the demand for a generation of workers skilled in AI and data. Now, studies from BCG show that what makes AI successful, what makes AI work, it's 10% algorithms, 20% technology, and 70% people. So arguably, the people is really the hardest part of AI to solve. Without the people, there's really no way for companies to start on their AI journey. That's the kind of the genesis of how everything happened. We really have a strong conviction around what we're building in terms of focusing on the people and not the tools. So during the time of this AI degree, I started validating the idea with companies in Toronto and Canada. And then I led my class to Silicon Valley on a tech trek in March of 2020. So during that time, started validating this idea on how do we build this next generation of AI workers. And if you get that positive feedback from Silicon Valley, from companies there, combining it with, what we've been learning in Canada, we thought we had something really great. And in June 2020, we had the opportunity to participate in this MIT Hackathon. And like you said, we won first place. We focused on the knowledge economy, and we've been on the rocket ship ever since. So from June to November, we won that second award from MIT. And really, that's when things started to begin to take shape. Now, in terms of how are we planning to make it happen? So like I said, Canada has this national AI strategy. And there's magical things happening there. So when you combine everything that's happening in the ecosystem, it begins to start to look like what we're calling the Shopify for vetted AI services, as easy as a Fiverr transaction. So we know what Shopify did for e-commerce. Nobody has done that for AI professionals. And nobody has made it as simple as a Fiverr transaction. So the whole idea of democratizing access to this talent, if we don't make it simple, it's not going to be accessible to companies at the lower end of the market, as well as companies that are not data first. So the whole idea of making it happen, the strongest epiphany came from having these teams. How do we put the computational modeling and power behind the formation and evaluation of these AI teams understanding what an organization is, how it represents the people, the tasks, and the sequencing of those skills, and how do we optimize all of that. And optimizing those AI teams is really the most difficult thing. And that's where we believe, and that's how we believe that next generation of AI talent is going to be built.
That sounds like such an amazing project. But, any company that is willing to invest in artificial intelligence needs to compete with those big techs out there for the specialized workforce. And as you mentioned, finding qualified people is such a huge challenge, as well as keeping them. Somehow you will also be facing this challenge, right? So how will you be able to attract those talents yourself to your platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're totally competing against the forces of Silicon Valley. Now, no matter where you are in the world, the talent is everywhere, and Silicon Valley has access to that talent. So just to level set kind of the whole landscape of the AI talent, according to Element AI, which is recently merged and acquired by another company, there's 10,000 AI researchers globally. So if there's only 10,000 AI researchers, where is that talent going to come from? Now, what we're focused on is not those 10,000 AI researchers. We're focused on building the next generation of talent. So like I mentioned, these AI research institutions, the universities in Canada and North America, there's a trend there where the trend is companies that have this AI talent, let's call them the practitioners. And let's say you work in AI and finance. Those practitioners want to also understand AI in healthcare, AI in supply chain, AI in marketing. So what is their option now? If you work at one of the leading tech companies in Canada in AI, and you want to work, let's say, in AI and healthcare to gain more experience, you can't do it alone, right? Usually, if you take on one individual working on an AI project, you become that single point of failure. You build a proof of concept, and the project ends up dying. So the idea is to work on these AI projects, you must work in teams, and they're really complex projects. So what we're doing is we're establishing the infrastructure to support these teams. So giving them the opportunity to work on real world projects, not science experiments on a laptop where that project ends up just dying and not, going into production. We're giving this talent, what if you're part of any of these, national AI strategy programs, we're giving that talent access to real world projects. The whole ecosystem, whether you're in Canada, Silicon Valley, Boston, it's fragmented and it's broken in terms of access to this AI talent. So the whole research around like cluster hiring or team formation, it's where finding that group of experts in a natural way to kind of work on these projects. And if these highly skilled talent are not part of our platform, there's very limited options for them to work in AI in other industries. So we believe by giving them access to the infrastructure and to these global projects, that's where we attract the talent.
Got it. So you're basically giving the people this whole portfolio of new challenges that hardly a single company would be able to give them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We're establishing essentially the infrastructure to support that interdisciplinary collaboration. So a single unicorn data scientist can't complete a project on his own. But when you put them in a team, you give them the other skills required to deliver an end. It's really hard for them to form that team on their own, plus get all the resources. That's where, we're coming in, adding value to those talents.
That's great. And you also have the intention of putting this talent pool from developed countries so developing countries could have access as well. But how affordable would that be to those countries?
Yeah, I love this question because AI has actually leveled the playing field, Maria. So if we can think of what is one AI outsourcing hub, there's really nothing that comes to mind. If we think of software development hubs, we think of India, Ukraine, all these, hubs like that. But if we ask ourselves in the tech community, what is the number one like AI outsourcing hub? There's really nothing that comes to mind and says, I want to send my AI project to, you can't send it to Silicon Valley. It's too expensive. You can't send it to Boston. It's also, it's not known for AI outsourcing. So this is where really AI has leveled the playing field. So the idea, Maria, is taking these ecosystems such as Canada, Silicon Valley, Cambridge, that intellectual infrastructure that's there, putting it on the platform. Now, the way that becomes affordable for talent in emerging countries, it's actually kind of following this trend. So there's a new generation of labor marketplaces, which is high frequency and high complexity projects in the knowledge economy. That's like tech-enabled labor. So it's not anymore, build me a mobile app, right? Now we're going to the next level, and these projects, they're highly contextualized for that local environment. So whether you're in Latin America, you are in Boston, or in the Middle East or Africa, you need that data translator, you need that decision scientist, that ontologist that's providing that local contextualized knowledge to make these AI projects work. So ultimately, the way that this can be affordable is by productizing the AI services. By productizing it, we're really lowering the barrier for companies to get started on their AI journey. So if we think about, we keep on referencing Fiverr, you can get a $5 logo or a $100 landing page. Nobody has done that for AI, but for everything else in tech, it's really become so accessible. And we believe by building this marketplace and the infrastructure, that's where we can productize the services, and that's where it becomes affordable.
That's awesome, Joseph. But AI and machine learning, they deal with so many variables. And culture is definitely a huge factor to take into account, right? So on the same time that you are making it affordable to developing countries, probably, there's going to be huge difference in any cultural difference and habits and, everything that's around that. So how are you planning to address all the cultural differences when making this such a global project?
Yeah, that's really a great question, because we believe that we're tackling the hardest problem in AI, which is the people. And you've heard the expression that the job is easy, the people are difficult. So for us, keeping in mind, now we're in the pandemic, and the work is distributed work, distributed innovation. So what we measure for is not a fit necessarily for culture, because if you're measuring for culture, you're really behind, right? So what we're measuring our teams for is more for aptitude. And the kind of the secret in Silicon Valley and these tech hubs is enterprise teams are the next big thing in the freelance revolution. So the variables that we're controlling for is actually more of the native integration into the enterprise. So I'll just kind of explain that quickly. So if you're a freelance team, you're working on an AI project, there's a lot of factors to consider. So you have to consider the data privacy, the HR, the computational resources, the community, the reskilling and upskilling, and then the verticalized user experience. So we believe that if we control for these variables, the teams can actually better fit in terms of culture and local experience that's required for the project. So that's kind of how we're looking at it, Maria, is in this lens.
So Joseph, let's say I'm your client. I don't have any structure at my company, but I have big plans involving artificial intelligence for my business, right? So usually, how long would it take me to be able to implement an AI project from scratch? And what are the steps to plan and organize internally to make it more effective?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because we face that a lot with our clients. So one thing to keep in mind is these AI projects, the outcome is not deterministic. So it's different than software development. Essentially, if we think about just like prediction and classification, that's become commoditized. But what we really focus on in the beginning is, what is your business strategy? So once we understand the business strategy and what business problem you're trying to solve, then we have a roadmap which we go into. So we start looking at the data. We really want to do a data assessment, a data augmentation, and understand a data capture strategy that works for your business. And after that, we really want to know what are the nuts and bolts of the use cases that we've identified with that data that works. Then we start working on the AI roadmap concept. We prioritize practical implementation. So this is going into month 2. Month 3 is a lot of researching and prototyping and testing and the AI solution development. And by month 4, we're calling it the transformation. And that transformation involves building the AI competency within your organization, that fractional expertise, and then establishing really the AI ops. And if you have an internal tech team, we try to transfer that expertise to your team. So the roadmap that we start with, really within 3 months, and so you can start to see results. Ultimately, it starts with what's called AI fluency within the enterprise. So if the leaders, the business leaders, the decision makers, the executive sponsors of these projects don't understand the AI applications, it's really not going to work. And that's what we're calling AI fluency within the enterprise. So just to kind of put more into context, there's a professor from Stanford, Dr. Andrew Ng. He put a document together called the AI Transformation Playbook. That playbook is for companies with a $500 million valuation or market cap and above. That's for the big tech. So the framework that they follow, they go right into executing pilot projects, building an in-house AI team. But the lower end of the market, like you said, if you just want to get started, there's no playbook for you to get started. And just to give you additional context on the landscape, companies as large as Microsoft, they can't operationalize all their AI projects, their research projects. So even something as simple as setting the research goal, defining the research goal, creating that project charter, a company as big as Microsoft can't take their PhDs, their other scientists off of other projects and put them on retrieving the data or data preparation before even going into any of the modeling work. So just to summarize, it's really a lot of understanding the business problem, understanding what is state of the art, and putting it all in a business context, because you need to map that business context to the machine learning and AI problem, and then you just match the business case to the data, and that's how the project works. So I hope that that gave some explanation on the process of how it works.
It does. And you know what? I actually would like to follow up your question, but your time is over. I'm going to do that on the next episode. So, just keep listening, everybody. This is the end of the first episode with Joseph Wehbe. We're going to keep going.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.